Osiris in Chicago.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, how you doing?
Hi.
I'm all right. Kind of a little nervous here, first time caller. First of all, I want to thank you guys for the show. It's been very helpful to me.
Glad to hear it.
But there was an author that very instrumental in me becoming an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And but you got Russell and I think Matt. They kind of like dismissed this author as like a hack.
Okay.
And they said that her work wasn't scholarly.
Okay.
And so what I wanted to know was, well, I have several questions, but the first question is, how do I determine what is scholarly?
Well, who's the author?
Acharya S.
Okay. Being scholarly is more than sort of an assertion of authority from some person. If you wanted to find out what the current state of physics was, one of the first things that you'd need to do would be to figure out what are the mainstream peer-reviewed journals of physics, and figure out what the general consensus view is. In general, you'll find that most of the major discoveries in science are presented through scholarly journals like this, where not only do people publish their ideas about what's new, like for instance, Einstein published his ideas about quantum mechanics and relativity in some very famous papers in German journals. But also, once they get into these journals, a whole lot of other scholars who are well established in the field will peer review it, which means that they will look for flaws and inconsistencies and rip into this stuff and say, oh, look here, this guy is saying he has a perpetual motion machine, and there's a major problem with that. The history is not a hard science like physics is, and so it's more difficult to come up with testing for historical claims. But there are still historical standards and peer-reviewed history journals and professional consensus on the kind of thing that happens. I'm not a historian, and I cannot make my own personal claim about whether Acharya S. Is a credible scholar. But I do know that everything I've read from mainstream historians say that Acharya S., who is claiming that it's provably true that Jesus is a mythical figure who never existed and is cobbled together from older myths like Mithras, and I think Ra is in there, I forget.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff is made up or extrapolated from stuff she read that she didn't really understand. I am not in a good position to make my own judgment about her, but I do not, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware that Acharya S. has even an actual history PhD.
Does that matter?
Yes and no. If she had a history PhD, it would say something about her ability to go through mainstream channels and fight for this stuff within the context of what people already understand in general about history. I'm not ruling out the idea that a person without a PhD in physics could discover and invent something amazing that would turn things on its head. I'm just saying that it generally doesn't work that way, and if you find that most of the mainstream scholars in a particular field disagree with or dismiss a particular source, it doesn't mean that it's definitely not true, but you might be better off reading that primary material and hearing what they've got to say about her instead of just calling up some layman on a TV show. You see what I'm saying?
Okay. Well, I'm excited about Richard Carrier's book supposed to be coming out.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Carrier, I think, is generally a well-regarded scholar, but I don't know. I think he is sometimes controversial, but yeah, I mean, I would definitely take him over Acharya S.
Okay. I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
What I don't understand is that, there's like a lot of forgeries and interpolations in the Bible, and it seems like when you guys go up against these Christians, that you guys don't really go in on them about that.
Can you give an example?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like that. Like most, well, I don't know if it's true, but I heard that most of Paul's writings are forgeries.
Sorry, what was the question?
Most of Paul's writings were forgeries.
Yes.
I don't really know anything about that. I mean, I don't even think you have to go as far as to say that Paul's writings were forgeries. The guy never met Jesus except allegedly as a ghost. I mean, even by his own accounts. So, I mean, I don't care whether a guy named Paul wrote what Paul said or whether some other guy wrote what Paul said. Either way, it's not a particularly reliable way to find out what really happened. When you got this guy going around saying, "Oh, I was blinded, and then I talked to Ghost Jesus, and he set me straight." To me, this just, even if you take the story at face value, it just smacks of a guy who is sort of piggybacking on a popular religion to get attention. And he was incredibly successful about that. He introduced a whole bunch of new rules and standards that were in no way conveyed in the first four Gospels.
Okay. Well, what about? I heard that Matthew, Matthew, John, and Luke are all copies of Mark.
I don't think they're all copies of Mark, but I would recommend that you read Who Wrote the New Testament by someone whose name escapes me, but you'll find it on Amazon.
Yeah,
Do you know?
I don't recall off the top of my head. My really limited understanding is that they weren't copied, but they kind of had the same primary source. Right. And so there's a lot of similarities, but it wasn't one to the other.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I think we're going to have to move on to another caller, but thanks for your questions. And, I recommend that you do some background reading on Acharya S, because I find that I learn the most when I step outside my assumptions and go looking for sources on the internet specifically for people who disagree with the position I want to take as an assumption. Anyway, good luck.
Oh, all right.
And really just look at all the sources that you could find if that's your area of interest. Is look to see what she says and compare that with what other historians and theologians say. And really all you can go for is consensus.
Right.
Is kind of a broad consensus as you can.
Anyway, thanks for calling.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, Osiris.